Hi, I'm Denise Hammond, Senior Counsel with the immigration firm of Grossman, Young, and Hammond in Silver Spring and Bethesda, Maryland. And I'm going to talk about whether an employer can reduce the wages of H-1B workers as part of a company-wide salary reduction in response to the coronavirus pandemic. What I have to say is for informational purposes and should not be relied on as legal advice. So, can an employer do this? Well, there are two government agencies involved in H-1B enforcement. First is USCIS, which takes a very clear position that in order to do it, the employer must first file an amended petition and a corresponding LCA. Paying less than the wage on the I-129 petition or the LCA is considered a violation. And then you have the U.S. Department of Labor. If an employer finds itself in a wage and hour investigation of a complaint alleging an LCA violation, the employer might have a defense under limited circumstances. In order to flesh out this LCA or this Department of Labor authority, let me give you a brief background on LCAs. When you file an LCA, you are promising to pay the required wage. This is the higher of the prevailing wage and the actual wage. The prevailing wage is generally set with reference to a recognized wage survey. The actual wage is the wage that the company pays to all other employees with comparable job duties and qualifications. In addition, the employer is supposed to document in what's called a public access file its compliance with these required wage conditions. Now, if an employer finds itself in a DOL wage and hour investigation, it would rely on DOL regulation as well as internal guidance that recognizes that actual wage systems are not necessarily static, that they can vary based on a number of reasons. For instance, cost of living increases. And in that case, an LCA and an amended petition is not necessarily required as long as the change is properly documented. So the enforcement handbook, for instance, of the DOL's wage and hour division specifically says that changed economic conditions can require an employer to adjust its wage system downward, and that no LCA is required as long as it's properly documented and, of course, required wage conditions are satisfied. I have to caution, of course, that this is an internal document and it might not necessarily be binding on the government. Interestingly, back in 2003, both DOL and the USCIS predecessor agency gave the exact same advice to the American Immigration Lawyers Association. But again, a word of caution is very important there because that's such old guidance and it was informal, so probably would not be binding on the government. So, despite this DOL authority, we have the general prohibition coming out of USCIS against lowering the wage without first filing an amended petition. There is a possible exception. That would be where the H-1B worker gets a raise. In that case, the employer might wish to lower the H-1B worker's wage back down to the wage stated on the I-129 as part of a legitimate company-wide reduction. However, it should be very cautious in doing so because the government could argue that the raise actually reset the employee's actual wage, which could not then be lowered without a new filing. So this general rule produces the very absurd result that H-1B workers actually receive a higher wage than US workers in a legitimate across-the-board pay cut, which is clearly not what Congress intended. Now, there are many companies that rely on H-1B talent, and they are doing whatever they can to keep their doors open during the pandemic. From our perspective, based on our experience, if the government cares about the survival of these firms, it should immediately issue guidance allowing employers to include H-1B workers in legitimate, across-the-board salary reductions designed to help a company get through this pandemic. I hope that this has been helpful to you and invite you to reach out to us if we can provide further guidance. Have a very nice day, and I wish you all a very safe time during the challenging pandemic. Thank you.